I know, says I gotta go, tired of going solo, but I'm never gonna go there again. This is what it is, this is who I am, this is where I finally take my stand. I didn't want to fall, but I don't have to grow. I'm not the one with two star hands, giving him the best of everything that's left of the life inside this man. I've been born again.
Good day, everyone. This is Eddie Huff. I'm not your brawny guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing my brawny paper towel shirt today, but yeah, I put it on and I realized, wait a minute, I look like the brawny guy, you know, and I'm a walking advertisement and a drinking. I was telling our guest, this is my new kryptonite. I don't know if you've ever had this. It's Coca-Cola and coffee. Can you believe? I know they're making things more and more deadly. They're taking coffee now and mixing it with Coca-Cola, and they put the 2-in-1. I love coffee. I love Coke. And now they put it in one. And not only that, this is the dark blend. I got the dark blend, as dark as you can get it. But man, I'll tell you, this stuff is good.
So I'm wondering, you know, Glenn Beck is Mormon. They don't drink coffee
or Coke.
Well,
I guess they've legalized. I guess they legalized Coke, because remember, it used to be against the law or the Mormon law for them to drink Coke as well.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about that. I guess not.
You know, we should send him a case. Send Glenn Black, again.
You're corrupting
Glenn Beck.
You should be checking into a sponsorship possibility there with Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I guess
coffee.
Maybe I should.
I got one for later in the show, too.
You've got one too?
Well,
so we got Brawny, we've got Coca-Cola and coffee.
Eddie, a month ago, we compared the chicken restaurants
Right.
who had the best chicken sandwich.
Right. Oh, you know what,
It's
Dave?
returned.
Your mic is not on, bro.
Okay. Remember we were discussing
there
the
he is. He's back.
chicken sandwiches. Is it Popeyes or is it Chick-fil-A? And I said, you know what I missed? I haven't had a Church's chicken down in South Tulsa.
Right.
Guess what opened today, folks?
Oh, Church's chicken.
where?
Church's.
There's a new one?
By ORU.
Oh.
Yeah, the old Arby's there, about 60th and Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
is now a Church's chicken.
Wow.
In fact, the manager talked to me, and he said, tell him come by and use code word Churchy, and the manager's got a special this weekend only. So
All
there you
right.
go.
So churches.
There you go. See, now we should get some kind of royalties for that. But, Eddie, it's still the same churches I've always loved.
Oh, I know. I told you. The churches is been it and is it. Now, I will have to say this, though.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the sandwich,
Yeah.
it's still Popeyes. The Popeyes hot, the new hot Cajun sandwich is the best. Yeah. Now, for you honkies.
Canadians. I'm Canadian.
Oh, well, no wonder.
Yeah.
See, there. Okay.
I'm not Canadian, but I live close
Okay,
enough.
I forgive you then. I understand.
Yeah.
Now I understand why.
So now, have you had the chicken and the wolf
Oh,
sandwich?
Yeah, I've had that one. That one is up there. Now, I'd rate it about the same. Now, here's the thing with chicken and wolf. Excuse us while we have this cuisine discussion. Chicken and the wolf, I will say, is up there with Popeyes. It is. But here's why. Because they go beyond Popeyes. Mm-hmm. Have you seen their mild is hotter than Popeyes or Church's. And then you get to the medium, and then you get to you're going to have a bad day tomorrow. No, really. They literally have one of them that says, you know, it says you're going to have a bad day tomorrow.
And that's a selling.
But anytime you see that on a menu for a level of hot on chicken, I tried the medium. And my lips were, they were bright red. I looked like Al Jolson instead of the white. It was red going like this. And I'm sitting there sweating and eating, at the old Farmers Road Market. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's where the original one was. I think they have one or two other locations.
There's one down across from TU, I know. And I guess they still have one in the Mother Road Market, and I don't know.
Who's that?
chicken and the wolf.
Okay, yeah, that's a new one for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And the only sad thing is they used to do little chicken legs. Now they had wings and legs, and then you could get the sandwich. And they've gotten rid of the legs. The legs were and wings. That was the.
Yeah.
Oh man, excuse us folks. My mouth is watering. I can't speak right anymore because Randy has touched that button of the chicken and the wolf. But so yes, you're right. Chicken and the wolf, I would put up there with Popeye's, hot chicken sandwich or fried chicken sandwich. And, I think Popeye's chicken sandwich is better than Church's.
I would say so. It was a little dry yesterday.
Yeah. But when you get to the actual chicken, the chicken itself, fried chicken, Church's is still the winner. Church's has the best pieces of chicken and the mashed potatoes, the biscuits.
Yeah, the traditional chicken dinner. Yeah.
Right. Church's is the winner.
Yeah, I'm still a Chick-fil-A guy on the sandwich, especially with the Chick-fil-A sauce. And but Church's,
a typical white person's chicken sandwich. Yes. No, it's not a slam, but it's true. It's true.
Yeah, and then I want to say, Church's though, their buns are kind of a pretzel bun. It's a cross bun with it's butter glazed and just it's got that almost a pretzely texture. It's not hard, crunchy, but it's like a soft pretzel for a bun, and it was really unique.
I have to tell you, I don't normally like biscuits. I'm a bun guy versus the biscuit, but at Chick-fil-A, their biscuits are so good.
Yeah.
I get my chicken on a biscuit because
that?
the biscuits are just good. They're that good.
Well,
so Chick-fil-A, I give it on the biscuit, but when it comes to just straight fried chicken at a fast food place, it's Church's chicken and the wolf or Popeye's for the sandwich.
Yeah, let's just ask Randy. Oh, by the way, this is Randy Krehbiel.
Oh,
Tulsa
have
World.
we not?
This is Randy's third visit.
Yeah, Randy's here. He's just one of the guys. We're just waiting for him to jump in there.
And we're actually here to talk about the election results. And
Randy, by the way, is one of our favorite guests because he doesn't feel like a guest. He just and I don't think we have had anyone that is as knowledgeable about so much as Randy is. And
Randy, to me, is the prince of the print media journalism in Oklahoma. Now he's blushing.
and he's also, the other thing I really like about Randy is that he's not, we wouldn't consider him, I mean, if you want to say our side, their side, the other side, he's not on our side, but he's not on their side. He's truly
down the middle,
a person, an independent. He's a dying breed.
Yeah.
A truly independent journalist is what I would call
But
it.
I want to know from Randy before we get into the meat of today is rank your chicken sandwich restaurants.
So I'm going to shock you guys. I rarely eat chicken sandwiches. So I don't really
Are you a
have
beef guy?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I like chicken. I just don't eat chicken sandwiches that much. And, so I'm actually not an expert. I don't know. So I remember when I first moved here, Church's was kind of king,
Yeah.
There were churches everywhere and I like their fried chicken, but I can't really comment on the chicken sandwiches. I only brought up chicken and the wolf because at work the other day, one of my coworkers was eating one and there was steam coming out of her ears.
Oh, there you go.
like a Three Stooges show.
All right. Well, I didn't want to dispense of that subject without hearing from Randy.
To finish it off, we're going to have to take you to Chicken and the Wolf one day. Or bring you and I'm going to get you a mild.
And she was having the mild, by the way.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to get you the mild and watch you, Minnesota Slim, and watch you. You're pink now. You will be beet red. You will be as red as this can by the time you get through with that mild chicken.
In case you're wondering, folks, what they mean when they say you have a bad day tomorrow, diaper rash. It still burns on the way.
Yes, that's exactly. Anyway, all right. Hey, Randy, the main reason we asked you to come in today, or Dave asked you to come in, I think is because we just had our November election, and it was a big surprise, not in Oklahoma. Well, it was a surprise here too, to the upside for us Republicans, us conservatives. It was a surprise to the upside because some of the polls had Joy Hoffmeister up by a point, or it was
4 or 5 maybe.
Yeah, neck and neck. So it was a huge surprise that the governor, that the new superintendent of education, all of them did as well as they did, and it was kind of pretty much a straight sweep. Now, one of the things that wasn't a surprise is that in all of the cities, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, the Democrats, college towns, basically, the Democrats did win. Joy Hoffmeister did win in the metropolitan areas. I think the suburbs probably wasn't so much,
right? But
it's kind of interesting, and that's a coming trend. I think in every major city, that's pretty much the trend in every state now. That the metropolitan areas, you have Democrats win, yet the suburbs, it's pretty much Republican, and that's. But anyway, Randy, please. What is your takeaway from this past Tuesday?
So I was one of those people who was not surprised by the results. Now, I say that I also would not have been surprised if it had been closer, and I probably wouldn't. I'd been a little bit surprised if Joy Hoffmeister had narrowly won. But I just, the Republicans have such a big advantage. And there are so many people that are just going to vote Republican. And I don't say that in some people think that's a negative, but I mean, the Republicans just have really consolidated their constituency, if you will. And it's really hard for in a statewide election for a Democrat to overcome that. I'd say the only thing that sort of surprised me was that she wasn't able to make a little bit of a dent in the rural Republican vote. I thought she would do better than Drew Edmondson.
Right.
I thought she'd do better than Drew Edmondson did in 2018, and she didn't. She actually did slightly worse.
I was surprised at that.
Yeah. So that was the only thing about that surprised me.
Let me ask you why is that a surprise? Because honestly, I thought Drew Edmondson was a better candidate. I never thought Joy was that good of a candidate. I didn't think she did a very good job at all as superintendent of education. So I thought Drew was especially, and then she switched parties and all of that. So whereas Drew was a lifelong Democrat, had served as our attorney general and different things. So why would you say that she was a better candidate than Drew Edmondson was?
Well, Drew is intensely disliked in rural Oklahoma because of his activities. When he was attorney general, he fought the chicken farmers in eastern Oklahoma, and he had an environmental streak, an environmental agenda that a lot of the farm people did not like. He also led the fight, and I don't know how many people even remember this or not, but in 2016, we had a ballot item. It was called the Right to Farm Constitutional Amendment, and it failed, and he led the fight against that.
Okay.
And so
he went after the Boy Scouts too. That was years ago when he was 18.
So he was, he was really intensely disliked in rural Oklahoma. And I don't think people had the same dislike of, they may not have been, all that enthusiastic about Joy Hoffmeister, but I didn't think that they would, just be, opposed to her. And, Eddie doesn't think she did such a great job as superintendent. A lot of people thought she was okay or better than okay. And then you have the whole, I really do think that the people who support public schools have, had reason and have reason to be concerned about Ryan Walters and Kevin Stitt. And I think some of that is reflected in the fact that even though they won fairly handily, they were still about 8 to 10% points below what the rest of the statewide Republicans. In other words, the rest of the statewide Republicans were mainly in the mid-60s.
The congressional race, senatorial.
The Senate races and the other state, Matt Pinnell was in the mid-60s.
Which is really interesting considering he's the one who really had the scandal. It wasn't Stitt's scandal.
Yeah, the Swadleys.
Well,
With
so
the
he was involved in the Swadleys deal. Now, Stitt's involved in a lot of other things. You've got the commissioners of the land office deal. And he was a guy that, I think whenever people think of there's a problem in government, who do they think of? Well, they think of the person at the top.
Right.
And in this case, it's probably, I think I've probably said this on your show before. Stitt's in an unusual position in that he is probably the most powerful governor Oklahoma's ever had.
He has consolidated
because and some of it is things that were done before he got there, and he's the beneficiary of it. But we've over time we've consolidated more and more authority in the chief executive. Our original Constitution really made the governor's office weak. Made it weak, and the power was in the legislatures, and especially the state House of Representatives. And over 15 years, there's been this, we wrote a Constitution in 1907, I guess. And so we've been working as hard as we can ever since to reverse it, to go against it. We wrote this populist constitution that spread out power. And then ever since then, the governors, and it's really been both parties, but Republicans especially, have tried to consolidate power in the chief executive's office. And so anyway, that's getting back around to, I kind of wandered off into the woods there, but he has a lot of authority. And so that can be good, or that, I guess it all depends. If you like what he's doing, it's great. If you don't like what the governor, not just Governor Stitt, but if you like what the governor's doing, it's great. If you don't like what the governor's doing, it's diabolical. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the education issue, you had this narrative, even Republicans in very rural areas looked at things like tuition vouchers, school choice and that, and they thought from a commercial standpoint, they weren't going to benefit. Such as Josh West said, well, there's not a private school within an hour of my district. Well, he was wrong on that. There was at least 3 of them,
Yeah, right.
But the whole idea I hear from suburban Oklahomans all over is they're so frustrated with the lackluster test results, which are getting worse here lately. I mean, it's so bad that they're withholding, dragging their feet and reporting just how bad it is. And I'm sure it's COVID, on that. But the parents are like, we need some kind of effort to push our public schools to have a standard.
Well, that's the whole competition thing, and there may be something to it. But here's the thing: is that there's no proof that the private schools are doing any better than a lot of the public schools, or the charter schools are doing any better than. And part of that's because a lot of the private schools don't have to report anything.
Yeah.
And so so I would say that again if you go to, and again, so backing up a little bit, first of all, it depends on what kind of a voucher system you go to. Right. So what they were talking about last year is we just write a check to every parent for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and they can do with it whatever they want. I mean, that was literally what the deal was. So, and obviously there's a lot of room for, things not going well with that. But it's not so much about who's homeschooling now or who the private schools are. It's, okay, if you say we're just going to write a check for $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 and there's no accountability for it, well, Josh West all of a sudden is going to have a private school in his district.
Exactly.
And it may be okay and it may not.
Right.
You don't know, because if there's no accountability for it, I think that's the issue more than anything else with the people who are opposed to it.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't competition itself an accountability factor?
Not necessarily. Not if you don't have any way. Well, I would say two things about that. One, if you don't have to report anything.
Okay, metrics.
If there's no metrics, so we're mad at our school, so we're going to move them over here to this school. Well, we're still mad at that school. But, I mean, so as a parent, do you know at what age should your kid be doing algebra, and how do you know whether they're doing algebra well or not? It's kind of, and I'm not a big testing guy. I mean, I think they ought to be doing tests that help the teachers evaluate the kids, so they know how to teach them. The other thing about competition in education, and it's not, the idea is not, I'm not saying there isn't something to it, but education is not like making widgets, okay? Mm-hmm. If we're in competition to make widgets, and I find a better, more efficient way to make widgets, I'm not going to run over here to my competition and say, hey, you can do a whole lot better doing it this way. Right. Well, in education, the goal should be teaching every kid. Mm-hmm. So you want some kind of collaboration. You know, you want, if I find a better way to teach second graders how to read, everybody in the system should know this is a better way to teach. Now, one of the governor's arguments that I think is very important, and this is the thing that the governor I think is right on a lot of his assessments. He's correct, and one of his is that everybody's different. Everybody learns differently. Everybody has different talents. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. So we need an education system that reflects that. Yeah. And so to do that, we need a lot of different kinds of schools. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is completely accurate. If we, our education system was set up for the big middle. Mm-hmm. It was not set up for people who are off, kind of diverged from that. A
special need of some sort.
Yeah, or even a different need. It's not that they're handicapped or delayed or anything. They're just different. Yeah. And, the problem the difficulty you get into with that is it's more labor intensive. It requires more training for the educators, and it's more expensive.
Most of them. There are some exceptions.
I'm talking about overall.
Right. Yeah. I'm saying some of them, like Epic is tapped into, is the folks that say, no, we just want our kid in an environment where they're not being bullied. So just give us the computer and connection and
I would agree with that. But here's where you get into a conflict is that, okay, on the one hand, Epic is good could be good for kids who need distance learning, or they need to be in an environment where they're somewhat protected, if you will, or, they're not being bullied. On the other hand, the complaint has been, well, we closed all of our schools and went to distance learning. So clearly, and supposedly we're seeing results of that in some of these test scores. Yeah. And so that indicates to me that, well, okay, distance learning is good for some kids, but it doesn't seem to be good for all kids or even the majority of kids. And that gets back around to, however you do it, if you want to get the most out of young people, you have to treat them as individuals and not as components in a widget factory.
Not groups. Yep. Yeah. One size never fits all.
And again, so that means you've got to have somebody who can, figure out, how do I reach this student? And I know people who are special education teachers, and not just in TPS. Mm-hmm. All they get done is fill out paperwork. Mm-hmm. They never actually get to teach the kids. Yeah. And so, is that unnecessary paperwork? I don't know, because I've not been through all of that, but it either means there's too much paperwork, or you need somebody to do the paperwork, which is what I understand they do in a lot of other states. They have additional staff who does the paperwork, and the people who are good at instructing the students instruct the students. Mm-hmm. But again, I mean, I hate to sound like, you kind of get what you pay for, and sometimes you don't. I mean, it's like Will Rogers said, people complain about the cost of government. Just thank goodness we don't get all the government we pay for.
Yeah, that's right.
but it's like it's like a quality anything. It takes more. If you go into a restaurant and you have a waiter who's waiting on 10 tables, the service is going to be different than if you go into a restaurant and you have a waiter who's waiting on 3 tables.
Yep.
And I mean, that part of it, that's the thing I think we have always grappled with in Oklahoma. How do you find the balance between what we can afford and what gets the best result?
Yeah. Some of it is self-inflicted. For example, I remember we were talking about school overcrowding.
Uh-huh.
And then, so we were talking about all these schools being overcrowded and everything. Then next thing we know, we close, so we get more money. Then we close 14 schools up in North Tulsa. And next thing you know, we close 14 schools when we just said we were overcrowded, and we take all those kids and shove them into the schools that we said were overcrowded. Well, wait a minute. You can't have two things at the same time. If we're overcrowded, why are you closing 14 schools? This was back around 2015, 14 or 15, I think you remember. And so, and as I recall, I remember reading, I think it was 2020, Epic was losing, parents were fleeing Epic, and then all of a sudden here comes COVID, and now TPS goes virtual. Everybody's, in fact, I remember a big headline, we're all virtual now. It was like,
right.
All of a sudden everybody's virtual. So all of a sudden virtual is not so bad anymore when now we're closing schools down just like everybody else. So somehow, you can't be talking out of two sides of your mouth.
Yeah, and
it was bad for them, but now it's good for us because we're doing it. But no, I agree with you. Maybe we need a new superintendent or an assistant superintendent that is over virtual learning.
Yeah,
I think almost everybody agree. Are you talking about a state superintendent or
a state superintendent over virtual?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's and they may have
a board already.
Yeah, there's a board, and they may have somebody in the department. I mean, that'll be interesting to see how the new superintendent handles that. But I think almost everybody agrees that the public schools all had virtual teaching or before COVID. It's just that they it was for kids who were
bad kids that were kicked out.
Or maybe they were, they were at home because of their health. They were but it was also an option. And, I've heard a lot of people, who know more about it than I do say, at least the schools around here did not do a good job of promoting that and developing it. And that's one of the reasons why so many people went to, I think why so many people went to Epic and maybe some others during COVID is because when they went to when TPS started doing it, they weren't set up for it. The teachers weren't trained for it. They didn't really know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, that's where I want to bring in here. Back in 2009, my youngest daughter, we homeschooled all our kids. Our youngest daughter was kind of in a co-op, and a couple of those kids decided to do Tulsa Public Schools online learning. They'd had it way back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrible, mostly because they couldn't get a tutor to return a phone call for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then they finally dropped it, went to Epic, and because they didn't drop correctly, they were turned into the DA's office for truancy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And it was like, we're going to punish you, And it was a failure of the school. So here's what I'm fast forwarding to. Epic did organize well and grew as a result of it. You grow by giving a product.
Too fast, I think. I think they grew too fast. That's one of the problems.
But I talked to a school board member, Shoto Macy School, small school district, Shoto area. And then I also have talked to people in the Pryor School District, which is right next to the north. I asked them back in about 2 years ago, I said, so what are you going to do here when the COVID issue is behind you? What are you going to do with that online learning? I said, oh, we'll close it. He's on the school board. I said, don't. I said, look, I know Ben Harris and David Cheney. I consider them friends. They grew that because they took responsibility. I mean, the servers for Epic of everybody's grades and progress were in Ben Harris's house. He wanted to protect, that environment. I mean, these guys literally took ownership in many ways, for good and bad perhaps. But I said, you got to put somebody over that online learning in your school district that takes ownership. I said, I want to see many school districts competing with Epic at their own game. And I said, here's what's in it for you. And Randy, I think you'll like this. When a kid is disruptive, perhaps violent on the school campus, we suspend him, as though that's punishment to a kid like
right.
that.
It's really punishing the parents.
Yeah, that's true too. I said, being on campus ought to be a privilege for good behavior. Instead of starting this alternative school, make your online where you put the kids that don't do well on the campus. And then they perhaps miss out on the extracurricular things, but yeah, you're disruptive, you're violent, or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, the school board member from Shoto, never thought of that.
Well, again, I think it comes back to the individual student. Some kids are disruptive because, they're. You
sound like a guidance counselor.
Well, it just seems, in my experience, everybody's a little bit different. And so, some people get in trouble but they're not really bad people. And I agree. And some people get in trouble and, yeah, they are kind of bad
Randy,
people.
Behind every fault is a need that's my philosophy. You meet that need and that fault may go away.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I just didn't want to sound too squishy on it, but so it's David the liberal over here. No,
actually I heard that from a gospel singer.
Yeah.
He looked beyond my faults and saw my needs.
Yeah, right. No, I think, people react in many cases to something that's happened in their life. But so, some kids, again, it depends on why they're not on campus. Are they on campus because they've been suspended, or are they not on campus because they're just not suited to the environment? And like I said, a lot of them, I say a lot, some number of kids who are at home doing distance learning cannot go to school because they have a health issue or something like that. So again, it goes back to, if we want to get the most out of our young people, and that seems to be the goal. I think it used to be school was kind of considered an extra or a privilege or something, and now we've considered it a must. You must be educated. It's
in our Constitution.
Well, I know it's in our state constitution, although, yes, we have a state constitution that says you must provide schools. At that time, I think the average school year was like 60 days or something.
You go. So, it was between harvest and planting, and it was through 8th grade.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, right. So, I think we have decided as a country, as a society, that the education is just not for your benefit, it's for all of our benefits. And so if we want, and you're a resource, and if we want to get the most out of a resource, we've got to figure out, we've got to recognize again that these are not, nuts and bolts on an assembly line and they've all been stamped out the same. These are individual people and they're going to respond differently. Different people are going to respond differently. They're going to have different interests. There's going to be different ways to develop them. And and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Boy, education, you talk all day.
Yeah. But bottom line, I think I think we all understand that there's a problem, and one size does not fit all. And I think we do have a problem. I hope that Ryan can get a handle on this, and I hope he gets the support of teachers, administrators, the governor, everybody down the line. It's something we all have to just cooperate. We've got to quit this fighting. The OEA, the governor's office, the House of Representatives, the state Senate, everybody needs to just stop the bickering. What can we do for the children? Okay. It's not about you, teachers. I'm sorry. It's not about you over here on 31st Street in that big administrative building. It's not about you guys. It's about the children. Okay. If you don't want to teach and you're not making enough money, get another job. Okay. And then if you do a good job, then we need to pay you enough money. But let's get our kids educated and quit going easy on the bad kids. If they're bad kids, kick them out, lock them up, do whatever it takes, get them away from the kids who want to learn. I remember one of the first years of EPIC, we tried to set it up. I was involved in helping them setting up an EPIC in or on-site learning center in North Tulsa at a church. And they had probably 36 kids. And at first, it was a mess. These poor kids didn't know any. I mean, it was really bad. I was just going, oh, my goodness, this is terrible. I went back at the beginning of April of the following, same school year. And you could not, these kids were into it. They were in the elementary school. They were helping each other. They were around computers. They were working. They were excited. And I remember a high school kid, he's probably about 15, and I asked him, I said, how do you like it? Oh, I love it. Do you want to go back? At that time, McLean. It was McLean High School. No. I said, well, what's the difference in here? And the thing, kid said, I feel safe. I feel safe.
I mean,
that was the big thing. And the kid had a smile. He felt, I said, what if you have to, I wouldn't want to go back because I wouldn't feel safe. And one of the kid's brothers who was still at McLean got shot that year, things like that. And you could just see the whole countenance. The kids, they were working on their own. When I first got there, the kids, I asked them a question. It was a math question. It was like a middle school. The young man didn't know the first thing. When I got back, they were doing algebra. I mean, they were into stuff, and the teacher was over here. And I was just amazed at the difference between October and April of the same school year. The same kids, but just the difference. And it's because at first the kids were just looking, it was like they had no clue. It was like they were lost in a forest somewhere. And here, 6 months later, the same young people were like in a different world, and they were into it on their own, working, and if they had a problem, they'd go to another one, or they would call the teacher, and he would come over, he could look and see what they were doing, and they would help them.
So this was an on-site?
Yeah. Right there in the church, and you know what happened? Back then, it was known 2,000 children a day in North Tulsa roaming the streets, not going to school, just out of school, just walking around. So someone went to the superintendent to ask if it would be okay we get these kids, find them places to take them in. And we said, yeah. But what the superintendent at that time did, he was the former superintendent before this one. He reported it to that then superintendent of education for the state, and he called them and made them shut them down. He called them to shut EPIC down in that school. And Janet Barisi, and she, to her credit, said, no, we're not shutting them down because they only have 1 month of school left. We're not going to do this to the kids in the middle of it. So she let them finish out the year, but she shut it down for the following year.
Yeah.
Those kids did end up having to go back to McLean, Monroe, some of these failing schools, and some of the elementary schools. They shut the whole schools. Those were among the 14 schools that got totally shut down. And so these are the battles that are being fought in the urban centers, as they call them, basically black neighborhoods, the failing schools, and you had a superintendent, a local superintendent of education in Tulsa who could care less about the true needs of the kids. He just wanted to hit those kids in his department, and a lot of those kids were going to be roaming the streets again the next year. So these are the battles that we're facing. So what we really need to see is everybody to start thinking about the kids and not about themselves. What do the kids need? What can we all do to help them? I don't care if TPS sets up distance learning centers, EPIC, K-12. K-12 is another one. It's not just EPIC. EPIC's not the only one of these resources that's out there. There are several of them that you can actually take part in. You know, ABECA has the homeschool system. There's a whole, what is the homeschool group that your kid, you were part of it, right?
Oh, well, the NOAA homeschool sports.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there's all these resources, and somehow, if all of these people got together and laid down their personal little peeves and said, what can we do to advance for our nation? We'll start with our city, our state, our nation, that we can start competing. Because I guarantee you, in Japan, in China, in Europe, they're not fighting these fights. They're educating their kids, and their goal is to surpass the U.S. in technology and everything else. And we're losing that battle. And somehow we have got to figure it out. Our balkanization of our nation in every area is killing us. And we've got these parties, I would say primarily one party that's really behind this balkanization, that's dividing, it's among race, it's among gender, it's among age, it's among, you name it, that to keep us divided and fighting each other so that elite can retain power. And that is not helping our nation. And somehow we have got to stop this. Otherwise, I believe our country is going to suffer.
Well, there are a lot of turf wars.
Oh, what's that?
I say there are a lot of turf wars in education and everything. And again, a lot of it has to do with money. So we spend, I think I probably said this last time I was here, but we spend a total in Oklahoma, all sources, about $7.5 billion a year on education, on common education. You put that money out there, and there's a lot of people fighting over just a piece of it. And so, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and you're right. Lots of times it is, and sometimes, what seems like the best interests in the short term are not the best interests in the long term.
Yeah.
But again, to me, it comes down to, how do you address the needs of each of these individual kids? And again, it's, the situation in one place is a lot different than the situation in another place.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
I just one more comment on that. I just ran those numbers. I think that's 10,000 per kid. If you're saying $7.5 billion and there's about 750,000, that might, school age kids.
I'll take your word for it.
That's about 10 grand, which is
either 10 or 100 grand per kid.
My zero.
One of the two, but yeah.
So
move a zero one way or another decimal point, but yeah, it's a lot of money.
I want to say, and I think you hit it right there, because there's a lot of money involved in it. And for some of them, it's their whole empire, their career, their industry, even the money handling for the schools. And the teachers' pension funds and that, they will go to the mattresses.
Yeah.
And I think what Ryan Walters is in for here, he's going to have to do a bunch of educating the public.
Well, and let me say this, okay, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea. This is not about parties, because there are as many corrupt Republicans out there as there are Democrats. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not pointing my finger on Democrats as far as when it comes to corporate corruption. Okay, that party, I may have issues with that party when it comes to political corruption, but when it comes to corporate corruption and greed and capital greed, I think there's enough greed in the Republican Party and independents, and it's just human nature that you have people that are going to be chasing that almighty dollar or Deutschmark or whatever on both sides.
Yeah, what I'm saying here is the same dark money that went after Stitt, and Randy, you and I disagree or speculate. We don't know where that dark money come from. I seem to think the tribes had all the motivation for it because hold on here. Because if you're trying to take away their monopoly on casino and gaming, then you're in for a fight.
I don't dispute that they were involved.
Let's hold off on that as a because there's other dark money.
Analogy
right. But
I'm turning it back to education.
But we don't have to, because we can speculate also. Dark money coming from the OEA and the teacher establishment.
That's where I'm going, Eddie. That's where I'm going. I'm saying the war has just started now over education
but it's not just on one side, because again, you put that $7.5 billion out there and you say, okay, we're going to start writing checks to people.
Right.
It's going to come from the other side too. It's going to come from people who want the money and don't care what the result is.
Do I dare mention names, corporation names?
Yeah.
Well, let's just put it this way. There is a construction company that just got through building, extending the stadium at Union High School over here, okay? Doing road construction down here, a memorial for 2 years or 3 years. That should have taken 3 months. That I would venture to say is probably a Republican-owned company.
I'm just saying,
but and so where's that money coming from? That's coming from the OEA or the teachers or the school.
Well,
right?
I mean, so construction companies were one of the largest donors to Kevin Stitt, and which is not unusual. I mean, because guess what? He wants to build some turnpikes. He and Joy Hoffmeister said, well, I'm not sure we need those turnpikes. Personally, I don't know if we need the turnpikes or not. I mean, roads are.
I hate turnpikes.
Well, so there's no such thing as a free road.
No. Yeah.
But
who's building the schools and the gyms and the new stadiums? Every time Union expands their stadium, Jenks has got to expand theirs.
Right.
Owasso, Bixby, in Oklahoma City.
But you know what? That's a local decision.
Right, but it's not a Democrat or Republican thing.
I would agree.
Somebody's dipping into that, and that money's coming from somewhere.
My whole point I was trying to get to is if you think the war ended on election night, it just started.
Yeah, and I would say, and of course, again, I'm a squishy guy, but I would classify it more as a discussion.
Yeah, of course.
Because, and I guess I'm getting kind of sensitive just because. We've got people who are actually fighting and dying in wars.
Yeah.
And we've gotten kind of overheated about some things and
that's a good point. We need to calm down the rhetoric.
And it's a discussion and it's an honest discussion. How do we do this the best and most, whether it's schools or highways or the justice system? What's the most effective way to do this and the most efficient way to do it? And you have people who argue in bad faith, but I like to think most people argue in good faith.
This is why, Eddie, I say he's the best print journalist we've got. Because you calm down the rhetoric and you go for the substance.
No, I agree. And because, when I read and I listen to the journalists, a lot of them are guided. I believe there are other honest journalists out there at the Tulsa World on our news networks, radio and TV. The difference is, I think a lot of them, the younger ones in particular, I think are driven by fear, many of them, fear for their jobs. So they do whatever they think is expedient to keep their jobs or to get a promotion. Many of them are motivated by, so they're afraid to express an honest opinion. They can see something's not right here, but I'm going to go along to get along, as they say. And whereas Randy has been there and established himself as enough. And there's a few others like that. And it's taken years to be able to develop that. And I think that's a big difference. So I don't want to write off all journalists. I think it's more of an industry-wide problem than it is otherwise. You know, as and I'll get to later, even like Fox News has really turned a page. They are now probably among the mainstream media now. They have joined the rest of the mainstream media, I believe, in not being the voice of the people any longer. I think they are on the left side of things, which we can get to later. But anyway, Randy, so election-wise, Oklahoma, I believe, checked its red box again, pretty much straight up and down the ticket. What are your thoughts about, let's say, the Senate races? We've covered pretty much the gubernatorial, the Secretary of Education, and so forth, which, again, I was fairly surprised, especially at Ryan Walters, too. I mean, that was a huge surprise is how well he did. But the Senate races, what are your thoughts there?
Are you talking the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, U.S. Senate.
From Oklahoma?
Yeah.
So, again, not big surprises there. I mean, it was sort of interesting. You know, Mark Wayne just completely went off the grid the last 60 days of the election. And I tried to talk to him the night of the Stitt rally, and he wouldn't even hardly talk to me. And which I think was a good strategy, actually.
Yeah.
Because, you know, what's he got to lose?
Right.
I mean, what's he got to gain by being out there? And if you saw the ads I saw for him were all about, you know, he's got this nice family and, you know, he's got the son who's fighting through some challenges and all of those things. And again, you just have to get, so Kendra Horn made just a tiny dent. I mean, Mark Wayne got 61% instead of the 65% that James Langford got.
Sure.
And the best I can tell, we're at about a 35% anybody but a Republican. You know, that's kind of the norm. And I'm not talking bad about Republicans. I'm just saying there are looks like there's about 35% of the people statewide who will vote for anybody other than a Republican.
They'll vote for Fetterman.
I mean, you know, I could say they'd vote for, you know, whoever ran in some of those, the woman who ran against, Matt Pinnell, you know, so Matt gets about 65% of the vote. The other two candidates in the race got about 35%.
Yeah.
So anyway, the only statewide Republican I think that got over 70% was Gentner Drummond, and he didn't have a Democrat on the ballot.
Right.
So we had a Libertarian get 25 or something percent, which means that it absolutely guarantees that the Libertarians get to stay on the ballot, which is their main goal.
And I know most of those people. I've covered the state Libertarian convention. They're a fun bunch.
Oh yeah, I think I'm glad they're around.
Yeah, but we did get rid of that threshold. What was it? 7%. The top.
I think now it's 2.5.
And it's any statewide race.
In any statewide race,
not the governors.
Yeah.
And that happened last time when Cindy Byrd ran. There was not a Democrat, and so the Libertarian got, and they have a joke amongst themselves.
All right, so moving on to the congressional races before we get off into the.
Yeah, right. Okay, so again, no surprises. I mean, the Democrats didn't really, I wouldn't say they didn't field any credible candidates, but they didn't have anybody who had the financial wherewithal to mount any kind of a opposition. And so, we went from, old reliable Frank Lucas came in at 75% again. And
he doesn't run any ads, does he? I mean, I've never seen
Frank so I have to tell you, Frank is, but I tell you what Frank does, and I may have mentioned this was the last time here. He goes to every county every year. Mm-hmm. He has an open meeting. Anybody can come in and ask him any question. Sure. And he will answer it. Yeah.
How come? Yeah.
That's what Frank Lucas does.
But it's weird. I never hear about his votes.
Well,
how he votes, what he votes, or what he does while he's up there.
Well, he's kind of an old fashioned guy, but he's looking out for his constituents. What do his constituents care about? They care about agriculture.
Yeah.
They care about oil and gas. Now he's got a little bit of Tulsa, and now he's got a little bit of Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. But those are the main things he's interested in. He's interested in ag. He's interested in science. He's probably going to be chairman of the science committee this year.
Wow. Oh, I thought he'd be ag again.
Well, he's going to try and get back. He's been off the ag committee. He's going to try and get back on the ag committee.
Sure. Wasn't he chairman?
He was chairman of the ag committee when they did the farm bill in 2000, whatever it was, the last farm bill.
Yeah.
He'll probably be chairman of the science committee, which has a lot of say-so on climate policy and things like that. And he's on the finance committee, not the finance committee, the financial services committee. That's like banking and things like that, which is also heavily intertwined with ag because they've got the commodity exchanges and things like that. So he likes to tell everybody he's the most boring person in Congress. He purposely keeps a low profile.
Yes.
He does not, he does not fill a bag with money and go off to a war zone. He's a guy who's he tries to serve his constituents. He's not made a lot of money in his 30 years in Congress.
So
he doesn't raise a lot of money.
He truly is what his position is supposed to be.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
I mean, he's the representative of his district.
And I would say, in my experience anyway, and I don't deal directly with the 4th and 5th district that much, but that's pretty much what all of our members have done in recent times. I mean, Mark Wayne Mullen, as 2nd District Congressman, he would say a lot of inflammatory things about Democrats, but he also worked with Democrats to get a lot of things done that were important to his district in terms of digital infrastructure, roads, hospitals, healthcare, that sort of things that were really needed in that district. He worked with Democrats to get stuff advanced.
And the tribes, of course.
He worked with the tribes, and of course he's a tribal member. Mm-hmm. So, I think most of our members do that, and it'll be interesting this year because, assuming that everything goes like we think and the Republicans are going to have the majority in the House, we've got a situation where I'm not sure if Tom Cole is running for chairman of Rules Committee, but he's a senior member of it.
Oh, yeah.
He's also, still a co-chairman in the Appropriations Committee. Mm-hmm. You've got Kevin Hearn's moving up pretty quick in Ways and Means, and then am I leaving? Oh, and then Lucas is.
Yeah, I need to ask you about Hearn. I seem to recall him giving a term limits pledge, 3 terms.
I don't remember that, and I asked about that, and what I was told was he said he supports a term limit a law or amendment or something, but that he's not going to do it unless it's for everybody.
That's smart. That's smart.
And that's where I think you should be, because otherwise you're hurting your home state.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people have forgotten way back in the 90s, I think it was, we passed a term limits bill in Oklahoma for Congress, and it was declared unconstitutional, that you can't do it on a state by state basis.
See, that's what I tell people. People always, they were always griping about Mark Wayne Mullen breaking his. And I said, look, we have term limits. They're called elections.
I agree completely.
They're called elections. So if the people don't want you, they limit you, And so it's in the Constitution. These strict constitutionalists, if you're listening, you're a strict constitutionalist until it comes to this. All of a sudden, you don't want to follow what the Constitution says. Now, all of a sudden, you want term limits. So,
I'll admit that. I've supported term limits while all the time saying, I'm a hypocrite because it's anti-constitutional, in my opinion.
Well, so here's the way I look at it. And this may be oversimplistic, but so your doctor is probably the most important person outside of your immediate family in your life. Are you going to change your doctor every 10 or 12 years just because, okay, you're term limited, I'm going over to this other guy that I don't know at all?
Yeah, a pilot.
Or the people who, I'm not a professional politician. Okay, I mean, I understand that, but look, if I'm going to have brain surgery, I don't want the guy who does it as a hobby on the weekends. I want the guy who's a professional. And I think one of the things that happened with Mark Wayne, and he has said this, is that he got to Congress and found out it was a lot more complicated than he thought. You can't just walk in there and say, bam, you guys are doing everything wrong. We're going to do it different, because there are 434 other people in there who disagree with you. They think it all ought to be done their way.
Yeah, I might look at what I think they might ought to do is an age limit or something, 80, 85 or something like that. That way you don't get a situation like you have with Senator Inhofe.
Strom Thurmond.
Or even Senator Inhofe where it becomes pretty obvious, Nancy Pelosi and et cetera, when they start hitting their 80s and you can barely, or Robert Byrd where he was, you're wheeling him in and stuff.
I think probably the most obvious one right now is Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah. You don't even see her.
She avoids the camera now, big time.
Yeah. So.
I wanted to get into, you just wrote a story this week. They found some bodies with some, looks like homicides.
One.
Yeah. Well, they found a bunch of bodies. One of them who looks like a violent, death, a homicide. Yeah. And this is now in the context of, there's got to be more people than were accounted for in the race massacre, race riot, 1920, what is it, 21?
21.
Yeah, and now, at least from this story, it kind of looks like, oh my God, there were some hidden bodies. But you kind of said, hey, no, we always knew this was a pauper's grave, right?
Right, yeah. So this gets really complicated when you talk about this. One of the things I found so I've been, covering this story for over 20 years now. and one of the things you find out is that by and large, people are not that interested in it, but the people who are interested in it are intensely interested.
They won't let it die.
And so you get into these arguments over sort of fine points of it. And so one of the arguments has been for over 20 years, well, we know we're reasonably certain, because there are records, that there are 18 black men who were killed in the riot, who were buried in Oaklawn Cemetery. We don't know exactly where, but we know they were there. Alternately, there were these stories that go back to the time of the riot. I mean, it was in the newspapers and everything, with the authorities saying, well, we're not sure if this is everybody that was killed or not, because we know there were people picked up in trucks, and we don't know if the ones that were picked up in the trucks are the same ones that we're burying over here, or if something that we just don't know. So these stories have persisted, and there's been these attempts to try and figure out what the truth is. So you have some people who say, well, we know these 18 are here, or we're pretty sure they're over here. Let's go look for all the others. And then you have people who are saying, well, we know these 18 are over here. Let's try and find them first and establish that and see if there's anything we can learn from them. And then go. So when they started digging in Oaklawn this time, they started out as you may remember, this is 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They dug kind of up on a little bit of a rise there, thinking that there was a mass grave there.
Yeah, mound. Yeah.
Yeah, a mound. Well, it turned out it was actually just a fill area. There'd been a creek that had gone through there at one time, and they had filled it in for drainage reasons. Mm-hmm. So then they decided to go down and start looking for these 18, and that's what they're doing now. But of course, they've uncovered a lot of burials, unmarked burials,
sure.
because this is a very old cemetery. The people who were buried in this section are thought to have been very poor. They would not have had, maybe they didn't have markers at all at the time. Maybe they had wood markers that have decayed. They may have even had stone markers that have been decayed. Some people think they may have even moved a few bodies when they put the interdispersal loop in. So the professionals out there have tried to be very careful to only exhume and really disturb the remains that fit a certain profile. In other words, 18 black men, and of course they can't be for certain they're black
right.
at this point, but 18 black men in plain wooden coffins, because that's the way that was described, with gunshot wounds. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they're looking for. They're coming under a lot of pressure. Well, why aren't you exhuming, because they've uncovered probably close to 50 burials. They've done 3 excavations now. First one, they got nothing. Second time, they uncovered quite a few. So they're close to 50 total burials, including some children. And they've come under pressure and criticism for, why aren't you examining all of these? Well, they have a woman who is actually a professional. She's a forensic anthropologist. If you've ever watched the TV show Bones or read any of those books, that's what she does. And she says, no, we're not disturbing any bodies unless we are reasonably sure that they fit into our profile. So they have taken DNA from about 10, I think, maybe a few more, maybe some more. This time around, they've uncovered 26 burials, but they've only exhumed 4. Mm-hmm. And from those, they found one with a bullet hole in his head and the actual bullet. Last year, when they were excavating, they also found a male. They can usually pretty much tell if they're male or female, because of their
skeleton,
their bone structure, right? So they found 2 that they can confirm were shot, but you got to keep in mind, basically all they have are skeletons, and in most cases they're not complete skeletons. So, if somebody was shot and the bullet went clear through and it didn't touch a bone,
right?
There's nothing to show that.
Or they found their body in a burnt out building.
Yes, that's a possibility.
That's still a casualty of a war zone.
Correct. I mean, a number of these bodies were described as, in the records, as burned. Mm-hmm. Beyond several of them were unidentified, and it's not really clear whether they were unidentified because they were so badly burned, or we just didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what's going on. They're carefully working on these and trying, and there's this big tug of war between people who, well, of course, there's some people who just wish they wouldn't do it at all, but the most vocal is between, you're not going fast enough, and we're gonna take our time and do it right. People who say because there is this enormous distrust of the city that's a legacy of not only the massacre, but just kind of everything, just kind of everything that's happened.
Here's what I'm hearing as a narrative is there's a lot of people who want to open the door to get rid of this statute of limitations and get reparations just opening wide. Mm-hmm. Now, the whole thing on reparations is that who is the victim? I mean, somebody could be the descendant of both a victim and a perpetrator.
It is possible, but you are correct. This is again, going back over 20 years, I mean, there was a lawsuit filed in 2001.
Yeah.
It's Johnny Cochran and
Johnny.
Ogletree.
Well, they brought in a lot of people like Johnny Cochran and put their names on it, but they actually didn't have any involvement. I mean, they were just there to put their.
But see,
but my point was that lawsuit was not just about there were quite a few survivors still alive at that time.
Yeah.
But that lawsuit, in my opinion, was not just about the survivors. It was what you're talking about. They're trying to find a way. They were trying to find a way to attack the theory of statute of limitations, which I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me like that's kind of a dangerous thing to do because it could, you may think it's going to be limited to this, but there's no guarantee that it will be.
See, that's where I think the mayor is dumb and dumber, that he can't see this and he's being duped, or he purposely doesn't think it's going to affect him because he probably figures, well, I'll be gone before the ramifications actually hit. But they even said it. I mean, when Cochran and Ogletree came, they actually said it. I actually have the documents actually it was in the Tulsa World. And they even said
I probably covered.
Oh, it might have been you. Yeah. Actually, the quote is there where Ogletree from Harvard made the statement that this Tulsa, the case, is the linchpin in the national reparations case, because if they can break the statute here, they can use that here for the national reparations case, and then Katie barred the door. If they can do that, then they can use it for a national reparations case. And at that point, it'll never end. It'll never end because it'll be case after case after case. And the Supreme Court, and of course, with the administration now, if they pack the court and all the other things they're trying to do, they will eventually try to figure, but then who gets the reparations? I mean, honestly, let me finish my thought, because honestly here, and this affects you, directly, because if descendants of slaves can claim reparations, why shouldn't you, as a tribal member?
I'm not a tribal member.
Well, your family,
yeah.
though. I mean, your family, right. So, which you would still benefit from as a family member. But why shouldn't your family be able to collect reparations for what happened? Or let's take the Sioux, Wounded Knee. Okay. Anybody related to anybody that was given smallpox blankets at Wounded Knee, or a massacre here or a massacre there. Statute of limitations doesn't mean anything anymore. You can go across, you name it. They have a case, and I would be right there behind them. Say, yep, they have a case. They have a case. They have a case.
Well, that's, and there's another, so I think there are people who are sincere in this, and, but they're also, motives are a slippery thing. And so what are the real motivations of some of the people involved? And that gets really complicated. And, I mean, I can't imagine the statute of limitations being waived, but there's a lot of things that have happened in recent years that I never thought.
Here's
there's a lot of things that have happened that
I can make all of that moot, Randy. I believe it was in 1990 and going into 91 that we actually dissolved our city government and created a whole new charter and became essentially on paper a new corporation. And so why does this new corporation have responsibility for what the old dissolved corporation was involved in?
Yeah, and I should point out that the current lawsuit, there is a current reparations lawsuit, and it's been limited to 3 people who have been identified as survivors, which I think will be very hard for them to prove if we're to ever actually get in court. But it's not based on negating the statute of limitations. It's their allegation is that it was a public nuisance, and there is no statute of limitations on the public.
Is that
public?
right?
Yeah. So what they based it on, what his argument is very similar to the argument that Mike Hunter made when he brought the lawsuits against the opioid companies. He cited it. And so then, of course, then the city and their attorneys, when that decision, he got, the state won that at the district court level, and then it was thrown out by a higher court. So, the city and the others that have been named, they tried to get it thrown out because that other decision of it. Well, Judge Wall, didn't exactly do that. What she did was say that, okay, it can only apply to the three people, these three living plaintiffs, and it's only related to what happened 100 years ago. And so, so these three people, one of them turned 108 this past week.
Right. Yeah.
The other one's 108 or somewhere around in there. And then the other one's like 101 or 102. So, in both sides, so the plaintiff side is arguing that the defendants are just trying to play it out until they die. I'm not so sure the plaintiffs want to go to court either.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal that I look at. Okay, in studying the whole history of the actual riot in the occurrence. Let's call it an occurrence. I'm not so sure I want to call it a massacre. Okay. Here's studying the history. Okay. Basically, the young man, something happened in the elevator. Okay. Whatever it is, we don't know for sure, but so the guy gets arrested. The sheriff took him up, secured him, locked up the elevator so nobody could get up there. He put deputies on every floor to make sure nobody could get to the guy. Then everything was secure. So a rumor hits North Tulsa that they were going to lynch the guy. So somebody gets the wise idea that we're going to go down and protect this guy. So they get a truckload of black people, men, World War I vets. They jump in the truck with their guns and they're going to head down and protect this guy against a whole city of rednecks. Okay. I'm just going to say it like it is. So they go heading off downtown to protect this guy. And so of course, then the word comes, niggers are coming. Okay. With guns. Okay. Well, like Eddie Murphy in 48 hours, your worst nightmare, a nigger with a gun, or with a badge. His was with a badge, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, so here they come. And here you got it. You got a white mob, this black group of guys with guns. Nobody knows. Somebody fired a shot. Boom, it's gone. So what's the proximate cause, tort law? What's the original cause of this incident? Is it the guys coming with guns? Is it the people reacting to the guys with guns? I mean, if the guys had never shown up armed, coming downtown with their guns, posing a threat, it would have never happened. Cause the sheriff, and here's the funny thing. The guy who originally was supposed to attack the girl, he and the girl left town.
And the sheriff, they both agreed that there was nothing
ever happened. And the sheriff got them both out of town, never be heard from again. And so nothing ever happened other than the whole town exploded and half the town, or North Tulsa, burned up to the ground. So it's one of these deals that here we are 100 years later, all of a sudden somebody's rewriting history to fit a narrative that they want to make something out of for their own purposes. Yes, it was bad. It was bad. People were hurt. People suffered badly. Many people have suffered badly. I always think of Native Americans, how badly they were treated, how badly Japanese were treated, how bad The Chinese treated the Japanese treated the Chinese, the Koreans, Russians treated the Germans treated the Jews. Historically, race has treated race badly. People group has treated people group badly. It's mankind, but until you let it go, it won't be let go. It doesn't help anyone except someone. Yeah. I'm just going to do it this way. All have sinned. All have sinned, and it's not going to stop. In fact, now I'm sorry to be preaching right now. This just ticks me off. It continues because it keeps coming up, and nobody's going to get rich on this thing except
the lawyers.
The lawyers are the ones who are getting the reparations. The people, I always think of the Dave Chappelle skit he does, the day after reparations, where you got black people passed out all in the streets, wrecked Cadillacs, and people with cocaine powder laying all over their faces, and they're passed out in the streets. Dave Chappelle is hated because he tells the truth, and it's not helping anyone. And 2 days later, the same people, rich white folks, are going to end up having the money, probably joined by Asians, and Middle Easterners and everybody but
and the
black
casino
people.
Owners.
Everybody but, Native Americans are joining the group. Everybody but black folks are going to have all the money again, all the same reparations money. That's probably how Native Americans will get their reparations. they'll get it's passed through. It's passed through money. It's going to pass right through black people, right to the Asians, to the Native Americans, and everybody else that's ever been injured is going to go right to. So maybe it's not a bad, maybe this is, it's reparations for all. Give it to the black folks and it ends up being reparations for everyone. So anyway, I'm sorry.
So I just want everyone to know.
Yeah,
that was Eddie Huff, not me.
We disavow any part of it when it was just
it's like the Mission Impossible deal. We disavow.
He hopes this tape was self-destructed in 6 seconds.
And what you didn't hear was Randy and me feeling nervous because somebody used the N-word.
Yeah, really.
If it was a white man, we were supposed to get up and leave, Randy.
I was probably supposed to get up. So I get in trouble for this because I just listen to people.
Yeah.
And I'm just the guy who sits in the back of the room and takes notes.
Yeah.
But if I could, let me say a couple of things about, one of the things with, at least in Tulsa, there is a big disagreement among the people who are involved in this, and we saw it during the centennial between the people who think, I guess you'd say reparations or payments to those folks are the first priority, and people who say that's only one thing that happened. We want to tell the whole story of Greenwood, and that was part of the, there was I'm not sure how well this is known, but there was a great deal of controversy over the Greenwood Rising Museum. I don't know if either one of you guys have been down there, because the people who wound up doing it said, we're not going to just make this about the massacre. It's going to be about the whole history of black people in this area and the history of Greenwood and to a certain extent of Tulsa. So it's got stuff about the massacre. It's got stuff about how it built up before. There are things about how it built up afterwards. Now, there's probably things in there that people will like and things people that don't like. There are black Tulsans who have vowed never to set foot in there because, they don't like where the money came from. They don't like where the money went. They don't, there is this real push and pull. You see, so on the one hand, you have the folks who have kind of been involved in the reparations lawsuit that's going on now. And some of the folks who've been most vocal in their criticism of the mayor. Mayor's really been caught in the middle of all of this stuff. Now, anyway, and then on the other hand, you've got the folks that say, let's learn from the past and move on. But then the other folks says we can't move on until something is done about this, what's happened. Not just the massacre, but, everything that's kind of happened over time. And to get back to kind of what Eddie was saying, when the people who really talk about reparations, it's actually pretty difficult to pin down exactly what that means to the most people, because we think of it as somebody's going to write a check and they're going to give it to somebody. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of people, that's not really what it means. What it really means is we have some obvious disparities. Mm-hmm. We need to figure out what's causing those disparities and fix them, or at least address them in a way that is not only fair but effective. So for some people, reparations means economic development. It means doing something to equalize the household. The household wealth is really out of, like, the median household, white household has like 10 times the wealth that the median. And a lot of people think that some of that has to do with federal lending policies going back into the 30s and 40s when they started the FHA, and white people could get FHA loans and black people in most cases could not. Mm-hmm. And the FHA, so the federal housing loans, I know this is really wonky, but what it did was it kicked off this idea, the whole grand expansion of real estate wealth. So you had a lot of white people in the 40s and 50s and 60s, bought houses cheap. Real estate got, there was suddenly a demand for housing. Their houses went up. Black folks either couldn't get loans, or if they did, their real estate values didn't go up. Right. So it gets really complicated. And I think that's what makes it so difficult for most people, is because, my head, I've got a headache just trying to think about it.
Yeah, but see, I can counter that. I mean, for example, you take the black townships, Bowley, Taft, and those. Okay. You had all these wealthy black farms. For example, Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was Black Wall Street because you had these black millionaires that owned all these black farms and so forth. You had a wealthy black class, and they want to blame white people for the devastation. But Greenwood rebuilt. That's the other group that you were talking about that want to show the prosperity of Greenwood after the riot. Into the 60s, it was actually integration that destroyed Greenwood. Okay, not had nothing to do with the riot. It was integration that did it, because people would rather shop at Montgomery Ward, J.C. Penney's than continue. I had a friend whose family owned the drugstore in North Tulsa. And as soon as people could go to the white drugstore, they wanted to start going to the white drugstore, even though they're selling the same drugs, same everything. But for some reason, the white man's drug was better, that kind of thing. But anyway, but all these black farms, very good, wealthy farms. And the kids, when the parents died, kids didn't want to work the farms anymore, because that's, the kids, they want to move to the big city, be big time, spend the money. They sold the farms. White folks bought the farms. They moved to the city. They have nothing to show for it. Once the money's gone, it's gone. Now all of a sudden they're poor, and it's the white man's fault. See, these are the type of excuses. These are the type of things that now they want to blame somebody else for. They don't want to admit that, well, we blew daddy's money. We blew grandpa's money. We blew our farm. It's easier to blame somebody else than take responsibility for the fact that you came from a wealthy family. You had a big farm. A lot of the farms may have had oil on them that we sold it to somebody now who sold the lease. I'm not in every case, but I'm just saying there are a lot of cases like that. I have a book by Booker T. Washington, called The Black Man in Business. And he tells story after story of these black millionaires back at the turn of the century, and how they came from nothing and worked up. There was a guy in Kansas, the richest, he was not a peanut farmer. He was a farmer in Kansas, a potato farmer. He became the richest, the potato king of the world. He had the richest potato farm in the world. And he actually saved Ireland with the potatoes, when they went through the Irish famine. These are untold stories, and black people don't want you to know them because you're not supposed to know that there was all this wealth that we had. You're talking about people couldn't get loans, couldn't do this and this and this. Listen, back in the 50s, North Tulsa was very prosperous into the 60s. Booker T. Washington High School was a very high achieving and a very highly thought of high school before integration. In fact, I'd say it probably dropped a notch since among the black students. I remember when we moved here, I met a lady who worked there, and our daughter did very well. She was at Victory Christian, and we were contemplating, should she go to Booker T or should she go to Union? And this lady told, don't send your daughter to Booker T because they don't treat black children the same. They stigmatize them. They don't expect the same out of them. In other words, they don't expect the same out of them as they do the white kids. And
the
so,
soft bigotry issue.
Yeah, yeah, right. And low expectations. So back in the old days, there was no excuse. You went to Booker T, they were hard on you, and you were expected to do well. That's how you end up with all these Harvard graduates and Harvard Law School graduates out of Booker T and Notre Dame and all these high achieving black people coming out of Tulsa back in those days, and you don't see that so much anymore. So, no, what I'm getting at though, Randy and Dave, is it's easy always to look at these things, but until you really stop and take ownership that it's not, and that's how blaming others is not a winning strategy. That's my subtitle there, that we have started accepting the fact that it's someone else's fault for our plight. My dad never let me get away with that. I never like I say in one, my son came home, or I came home one day, and when I walked in the door, my son says, Dad, I can explain. I said, explain what? He already knew. He said, well, I got a B in math. You know, now I'm a guy who never got more than a C. They never knew that. I never let them know that. But anyway, you know, he said, Dad, I can explain. I got a B. I said, oh, really? Why? He said, well, it was a hard class. The teacher, I said, well, did anybody get an A? Well, yeah, a couple of kids. Well, then why weren't you one of those? Yeah. Right? So see, I just wouldn't let him, in other words, I wouldn't let him make an excuse and he ran off. But what I'm saying is, it's easy to say, oh, it's okay, son. Yeah, you did your best. Good. Yeah, let it slide. I wasn't going to beat him because he got a B. I wasn't going to punish him because he got a B. But I always let him know that don't let that be an excuse. Don't let that be, you go do it. You know, how is it? I used to see these ads on NFL Network about, black children need to see example of their own kind succeeding so they can succeed. Well, if that was the case, how did anybody ever become a success? How did you have the first black person become anything if they never saw anybody black be? You know what I'm saying? Okay. I mean, that's a terrible excuse. I want to say,
because this just goes right off what you said. You and I both know a very prominent businessman, Henry Primo. Henry's been a great, responsible member of the community. He's given back a lot. Since he's retired from the car dealership business, he got involved at Greenwood Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. One of the things Henry started, he got a bunch of other businessmen to come with him in that. And they wanted to just mentor the black businessmen in North Tulsa. Because here's what happened. It's going to tag team off of what you just said about as soon as they could shop at Renberg's, they didn't want to shop at the black, clothiers. And what's happened is that local entrepreneur businessmen's family, as part of the community, didn't see, it became less of an impact. And then culturally, community-wise, the people didn't identify with the entrepreneur class. And shoplifting all of a sudden became a better, because you were stealing from the man, not your neighbor. And now Henry's just saying that is a hypothetical kind of thing, but to really raise up a well-rounded community, you have to have that entrepreneur class. It wasn't just some chain, some Dollar General store. And Henry said he's gotten a lot of pushback from a lot of people who wanted to accuse him of being the reason. A guy who moved here in the 80s from Louisiana. Somehow he's responsible for their problems. But I think that is a component, is you've got to raise up entrepreneurs.
So, and that's actually something I wonder about for our society or in general, because, 100 years ago, we were a country of farmers, which are basically small businessmen.
You grew up on a farm.
And small businesses. And everything was Walmartized, which Walmart started as a small business. Mm-hmm. But what I'm getting at is that as business evolved, you have the big retailers, if we can use retailers, took over. It started with Sears. Yeah. And so it was not only, I don't really know this, but just in general, it seems like the decay of the business district in Greenwood matched the decay of the business district in downtown Tulsa. That's and true. More to the point, the decay of businesses in small towns all across the country, because instead of going to my parents owned a hardware store too. So in a town of 800 people. Mm-hmm. So they had to work like crazy to keep their customers. They carried everything under the sun so that they didn't go, 8 miles further over to the town with the Walmart or the, Western Auto or something like that. Or, look, Otasco was one of the very early ones. Well, they got put out of, they were a little bit bigger fish that got swallowed by the even bigger fish. Yeah. So I think that it's difficult. I mean, I'm not a business person, and this is one of the things I've been asking a lot of questions about this lately in terms of what are the obstacles to small business, and especially what are the obstacles to Black-owned small business. And there is a lot of activity in that area in terms of trying to promote it. And you're seeing things, and this is another thing that goes back and forth among sort of the people who, with a sense of history on North Tulsa, is you have the people who want the original Greenwood to go back to what it was, which is virtually impossible.
Right.
And then you have other people who say it's the spirit of Greenwood that we should try and preserve and expand on. And they look at Pine and Peoria, where over 20 years you've had, there's
it's a roller coaster.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have there's a Popeye's chicken there now, and I think that's owned by a Black person. There's a Sonic there. I think that's owned by a Black person. There's all these businesses that have come in there. Now, will they last? I don't know. I think another thing that has changed is that, best I can tell, in the 1920s and probably on up into the 50s and 60s, a lot of the Black-owned businesses were trades, in other words, plumbers, carpenters, construction workers, that sort of thing.
Mechanics,
Right. And so there's a push to try and bring that back, because for a while there was a feeling that those were
less than.
And again, it applies to the general population too.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it shows up more in a minority population because, well, they're the ones we see, because they're the ones that are different than the rest of them.
Here's the problem again. It goes back to exactly what I said. This is maybe 20 years ago now. I had a young Black guy call me up. He wanted insurance on his. He had just graduated from OSU to Okmulgee, had his mechanic certificate, and he wanted to open their shop. And so he opens it up on North Lewis. And so I said to myself, I didn't tell him, I said, you sure you want to open it up here? Because my thinking was, that's not the right place to open it up. Mm-hmm. What you want to do, and this is the secret I learned from the Jews, okay? The Jews used to set up their place in the ghetto. Like the Jewish shops, when I lived in Philadelphia, they had every corner, street corner almost, or every couple of blocks, you had a Jewish corner store. And all the black people in these ghettos, or Polish people, whatever, they would go to the corner store and they would buy, they were like the old 7-Eleven, but you would, I guess they call them bodegas in New York. But anyway, you go to the corner and you buy your milk, your soda pop, candy, ice cream, bread, just, yeah. And so they were very prosperous, and these people would make their money there, but then they would save their money and then they would take it and they would spend it in the Jewish community. They lived in the Jewish community, but it all went back to the Jewish community. So what my thought was, why don't you set up your shop in South Tulsa and then come back, build your house, buy whatever you're going to get in North Tulsa? But see, his thinking was, I'm going to give back to my community by setting up this mechanic shop in North Tulsa. And it's still that same thinking that there was when integration hit. No, the people of North Tulsa, no, they're going to go to Walmart garage. They're going to go to, whoever, whatever your mechanic shop down in South Tulsa.
Well, they're going to go whoever's cheaper usually.
Right.
Most people will.
Right.
They'll drive 20 miles to save $1.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, you've got some little shop over here, on the corner by some brother that's just out of school or whatever, whereas he could have set up, at 61st in Lewis or 61st in Memorial, found a little place, set up a shop. And I guarantee you, like you said, he could probably, start charging a fair price compared to all the other places, and probably would have had people lined up. He probably, couldn't take care of all the business. And then this back then, it was really, lucrative to be in the automotive business, and taking that money, gone back there, and then keep expanding, bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's the mentality that is still gripping us, that people think that to serve your community, you have to do it in your community versus setting up somewhere else and then bringing back and investing in your community. So like your fast food places, just because I would be willing to bet you anything, whoever owns that Popeyes or whatever, they may be black, but I guarantee you they don't live in the neighborhood. I bet you they live somewhere else. And that's the tragedy of it all. That the people that own these businesses, black or otherwise, don't live in the black. For example, what was the famous barbecue place on Peoria?
Elmer's.
Elmer's. Okay. Elmer's did not live in North Tulsa. Okay. The owners of Elmer's was all this great barbecue, black owned, black operated, but they did not live in North Tulsa. And so, but they were smart. They didn't have their place in North Tulsa either. It was mainly you go in there, you had black people coming to Elmer's because they liked the food, but it was white business people that ate lunch there that gave them the majority of the business. But see, this is how the people have to start thinking. You have to think differently with the business sense to make your money. And this is the thinking that somehow you're almost seen as a trader.
No, I think that, yeah. I mean, I've wondered about that as a white person. I don't have any way of knowing this for sure, but I wonder what sort of pressures or if there are on successful, black folks or any minority group to look out I don't know how else to say it. Look out for your people, help your people.
Yeah, no, you're seen as a traitor, but yet at the same time, the most successful black people, they really are successful living in the neighborhood. It's taking your life in your hands because, you're at risk of crime. So, I mean, it's just a fact of life. And you may be seen as a traitor, but are you a traitor or are you a victim? I mean, what do you want to be? What would you rather be, a victim or a traitor? And so it's just a fact of life.
Well, it's sad because
it is very sad.
Who owns you? I thought, we celebrated emancipation and nobody owns me. I can go wherever I want to go.
Right.
And all of a sudden.
And now instead of being owned by white people, we're owned by black people in a sense. Mentally, psychologically, we're owned.
Pressured.
We're owned and pressured.
But again, I don't know that that's limited to black.
No, you're right.
I mean, I grew up in a rural, now, of course, this is a long time ago now, but, after I got out of school, I got to thinking about it, and the two hardest classes to get out of, and I apologize if I've told this story before, but the two hardest classes to get out of, to take something else, for boys was shop, and for girls was home economics. It was almost impossible to avoid taking those classes, both of which I think are useful. But my point is that it wasn't some kind of advanced mathematics or science that everybody was expected to take. It was these. Well, why? Well, because if you take too many advanced classes, you're going to go away to college. If you go away to college, you're not coming back. And that was an almost all white school district. So I think this applies to everything.
You're right.
I just think that, as a society that has been, a majority look like David and I, we notice people who look like Eddie, and we're looking at them and say, well, look at what they do. And we're doing the same thing, but we don't recognize it.
Right. No, you're right. You're exactly. And that's why I talk about there is no such thing as racism. I think it's always been a classism or, an interpersonal thing, For example, in Europe, before they ever knew there were Africans, before they ever knew there were Indians, before they knew there were Asians, just within Europe, say, they found somebody to be prejudiced against, right?
Course,
the lower class, right?
The Irish, the Italians.
Yeah. The Welsh, the Scot. Well, in England, you had the Scottish, the Welsh, and in Holland, the Germans. This is the funny one. Okay, you got Holland and Germany border each other. Okay, okay. My uncle, okay, he came to Holland, okay, and he calls me from the border. He had come to the gas station, and he calls me in Germany. He said, "Eddie, I need you to talk to this guy because I can't understand him." And I'm saying, I mean, the languages are like,
one was speaking Dutch and one was speaking German.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's probably, there's a little difference, but I guarantee you could understand, you know what I mean? He just didn't want to understand this guy who is from across the border. It was just that kind of hard-headedness. So I had to speak to this Dutch guy and then speak to my uncle, and I'm thinking to myself, now, is this stupid or what? And I'm like, and then, so my uncle, it was so bad that I had to drive all the way to the border to pick up my uncle and lead him to my house. I'm thinking, this is unbelievable.
So to me, race is primarily a function of economics.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
hallelujah. Somebody gets
it. It's a way that,
it's an identifier.
It's a way that in this particular case that some white people use to say, okay, well, those people are a different color than we are, so that's easy to identify them, and it makes it easy for us to say, they're not as smart as we are, or they're not as good as we are, so we have the right to own them, to tell them what to do all of that stuff. And as you say,
because at one time they were on a lower educational, economic and, intellectual, level from us, okay, or civilization wise. So Europe,
well, they were different,
advanced,
but that doesn't mean that the black people weren't as smart as the white people. They were just smart in a different way.
Well, no, there's a difference in intelligence and intellectualism. So, for example, Europe had advanced intellectually greater than the African in the jungle, okay? So on an intellectual level, Africa was not as advanced as Europe. And so for that reason, they looked at these people as primitive people, okay? And so for that reason, and the difference was there were a lot of Europeans that weren't there either, or say North Africans or whatever. And the same happened when they came to the Americas, right? The Indians and the South Americans or whatever. But it was easy to identify because black people, by their skin color, oh, well, that's those ignorant Africans. That's those ignorant Indians. Well, as time went on, the blending of the other races was less easy to identify. So they were able to mix in easier and move up the scale. Whereas black people, because of their skin color, could more easily always be identified as being a I don't want to say subhuman, but a less of a race than this one.
Well, they were identified that way because they weren't Christian. And here's the way I look at it.
I don't even think they're Christian because even when they became Christian, the bigotry was still there. It was still seen as that. Hey, listen, Randy, we've got about 10 minutes and this is next show.
Okay.
No, this is a great discussion, people. This is very important for people to understand. And this is the type of thing that I think would be really good for everybody to understand and a good discussion for us to get into, because this is something I try to get into a little bit in the book, but very, very little bit. But because I think people need to understand this, why black people have been, kept at a lower rate. I call it the totem pole. And we have this hierarchy. Nobody wants to be the low man on the totem pole. That's why if you go to Texas, Hispanics and black people don't like each other because each one considers the other one lower than the other. And no one wants to be the low man or low woman, low person on that totem pole. So it's a discussion we will table, and we need to get into it. This is a good one. We probably should have started that would have been it.
So anyway, I have one other thought on it. But
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Hold that thought. Write it down. Don't, because I will forget. Hey, listen, I do want to close this out, and this would be a great one for us to finish on. I have this, thought that, the Democrats, the red wave basically did not happen. Okay.
Not the blowout.
We may not. It may end up, the Democrats may hold Congress and the Senate. The way it's looking, you don't think so? Well, we'll see. I mean, I hope you're right, but we may, it seems like all of our eggs now are going to be in the Georgia Senate race, and we don't know yet about Congress, about the congressional races. So we'll see. But I am of the opinion Democrats did not really defeat us. The Republican Party basically gave it away. We did not support, Mitch McConnell and the Republican establishment did not support their candidates like they could have and should have. And I believe that's a huge, huge disappointment. The Democrats basically used a very, very smart strategy. One was the abortion issue. And it's really sad that the Democrats felt that the issue of killing babies or preventing babies from being born, and the fear of loss of democracy. They took the word democracy and just pounded it into the ground that Republicans are going to destroy our democracy, when democracy, in fact, is nothing more than having another party voice a difference of opinion. That is democracy. When you take that away and make it a one-party rule, that is actually, in essence, killing democracy. But somehow the Democrats, through that fear of people losing democracy, and which basically meant losing that one party, which the Republicans have never, ever even hinted at taking away your right to believe what you want to believe, as you can see with our discussion here today. So anyway, but Republicans throughout the country, with the exception of solid red states, pretty much throughout the South, with the exception of Georgia, pretty much, Republicans did win those, but in all of the larger states, Pennsylvania and out west, Arizona, Nevada, which are still hanging in the balance, somehow we did not fare very well. Now, here's what I want to finish on. This is really becoming a very, very serious issue, a discussion that I've been seeing. We now have a lot of Republicans and news media that are ready to dump Trump.
The
on the Republican side.
The war started.
It started.
Yeah.
Fox News is pretty much totally off the Trump train.
Yeah. So is Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. A lot of Republicans. Interestingly, Newsmax is not going for it. And I'm seeing people on Fox, guests that they're bringing on, they're not going for it either. They're still sticking with Trump. They seem to want to, everybody now wants to pump up Ron DeSantis. They're priming him as their candidate, the candidate for it. But I would like, let's start with you, Randy. What are your thoughts about Trump and DeSantis? Because you're more independent, you're able to see it from more distance.
So I would say there is no one in the picture right now that really excites me as a presidential prospect.
Mm-hmm. On either side?
On either side.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I just have a really different perspective. I think the biggest hindrance to the Republican Party right now is Donald Trump. I really do. Mm-hmm. Just because he just attracts controversy wherever he goes and says things that alienate people. I know that some people like that, and I completely understand it. I think a lot of people feel like the government does not, especially at the federal level, is not interested in them, and they see Donald Trump as someone who is. But I just don't think now, is Ron DeSantis the answer? I don't know. I mean, if you look at previous elections at this stage, the person who winds up getting the nomination is often somebody who's back in the pack at this point. And who that might be for the Republicans or the Democrats, I don't know. I mean, would the Republicans go towards somebody like the soon-to-be former governor of Larry Hogan? I don't think they would at this stage, but they might. On the other hand, who else is out there? I mean, I don't think they're going to go for.
Well, Glenn Youngkin, we saw him last week. You and I were there when Glenn Youngkin.
Oh, Glenn Youngkin. Yeah. I mean, he's another one that's been discussed, and, I think he'd have a chance. It could be that, DeSantis in the end comes across as having too hard an edge. That's where I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. No, that's pretty much all I have to say.
I want to hear from you too.
Okay, that's exactly it. Mark Hay on his radio show yesterday nailed it. So get the podcast on it. He said, the people who may want to push DeSantis now, you got to be careful, because some of those people who are propping him up are the same people who early on were propping up Trump in the primary, because they felt that he would be the easiest to take down going into the general. And there is some of that. There's some in the media that says, we built you up, we can take you down. So I think, they could, because obviously certain parts of the media, CNN being one of those, MSNBC, really went predatory after Trump. Trump just had a different demeanor than Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan would say to Sam Donaldson, there you go again, and he would just brush over it. Donald, like you're saying, had a different tact. Some liked it, some didn't. Some still don't like it. I just don't think that we sidestep that kind of hostility by going for a DeSantis or a Youngkin. It's going to happen regardless.
I agree. See, that's my point. See, I want to quote Franklin Roosevelt that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And within the Republican Party, it's the fear, and actually I'm just going to call it out as pure, unadulterated cowardice among the rank and file Republicans, that we have allowed the Democrats to define the party. We're allowing the Democrats to define Donald Trump and the Trump followers. We have allowed the media, after year after year after year of constant pounding, to say, Uncle, we give up. We'll get whoever you want us to get.
Just be nice to us.
Yeah, just be nice to us. And it's not going to happen. We will pick a nice guy, and the nice person won't do any better. It'll probably get slaughtered, in fact, when it gets down to it, as we've seen in these other races where you've had nice guys run and just get walked over in this election cycle. So because you look at Ron DeSantis, he wasn't nice at all. He was Trump light in Florida. In fact, if you look at every race in Florida where the candidate won, in Florida is the example of just a sweep where the Republicans obliterated the Democrats. That state is where the Republicans have been the most Republican of any other state that we have. As we said, DeSantis is basically Trump light. Marco Rubio has turned out to become pretty much Trump light in there. You name them on down the line. They're very much Trump followers. I wouldn't call them necessarily. And honestly, I think, a lot of people question is, why is Trump attacking not Marco Rubio, but Ron DeSantis? I think Trump attacking DeSantis actually was done to help Ron DeSantis, because in his attacking DeSantis, it made DeSantis not look like a Trump follower, and actually helped him distance himself and give people, oh yeah, okay, we can vote for him. Some of those people like that. So, but, in the end, anybody that thinks that if we pick someone who is not a Donald Trump and will be a nice guy, a nice person, a nice woman, they're sadly mistaken if they think the Democrats will go easy on them and make it easy.
Well, sure, the Democrats are not going to go easy on them.
No.
But I will say this, talking to Democrats and more independents, in some ways they're more afraid of Ron DeSantis than they are of Donald Trump. They don't consider Ron DeSantis Donald Trump light. In some ways they consider him like Donald Trump, but more focused and again, more hard edged. He doesn't say as much as Trump. He's not on Twitter all the time, which, we may not have Twitter much longer, but anyway, he's different than Trump, but he's kind of in that same vein, but he is even tougher than Trump. And so, that's the perception. I'm not saying he actually is. That's the perception. And it's so interesting. One of the nice things about hearing from a lot of different people is some of the things that Eddie has said and that you've said, David, are exactly the things I hear in reverse from Democrats. Oh, the Republicans just define who we are. The media is against us. All of that stuff.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do as a political party is define the other party.
Well, right, exactly. That's the nature of politics. Yeah. I don't see any, if you're worried about the other guy saying mean things about you, then, you're in the wrong game.
Yeah, but see what you said about DeSantis, you're not, Democrats saying, they're more afraid. Well, that's only because the mainstream media and everyone has not yet even begun attacking DeSantis, because right now their mission, priority number one, is get rid of Trump and prop anybody up to get rid of Trump.
Well, yeah,
once we get rid of Trump, then we'll focus on you.
And I think there is, James Langford, last time we talked to him, said, the national media is just obsessed with Donald Trump. And I think there's a lot to that. It's like if Donald Trump was anybody besides Donald Trump, nobody'd be paying any attention to him, but he's Donald Trump.
Okay. I want to tell you what Rush Limbaugh said on the subject. Right after the 2008 Republican convention, a couple of businessmen called him, wanted to play golf. And he arranged a time. They came down to play golf right away. Second fairway. They started, you got to talk to McCain's people. We got to get rid of Sarah Palin. We cannot have her on the ticket. And he's like, why? And he's just listening and just focusing on his short game, and he said, well, the media are just destroying her. They're just going to make a mockery, and they go on and on. Finally, they finish up the second hole, and he says, so what you're really wanting to do is let the media pick the running mate. Oh, no, we're not doing that. Well, yeah, because you're hinging on, will the media talk nice about this person? And Rush basically shut him up. They weren't interested in the golf game. They're interested in.
So if it's done right, I mean, you don't want the press picking them. What you hope for is that the press will take all of the candidates and ask them some really hard questions. And through those questions, you get an idea of what this person's capacity really is.
Right.
I think that happened with Sarah Palin. But it doesn't always work. As you know, it doesn't always work that way. Somebody shows a weakness somewhere and we attack that weakness. I mean, it's like Dan Quayle and potato, We find that and we just go after that.
You really think that they're seeing any weaknesses in Biden and the press at the White House press corps is actually going?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that when it works, it's supposed to work that way. And I use it as an example just because it's an easy one.
Yeah, they're lackeys though.
As the potato. Well, I don't know because, we don't see everything that goes on in a press conference usually. And, he gets mad at the press. Every president we've ever had thinks the press picks on him.
I'm not criticizing Biden. I'm criticizing the press for other than you got Peter Doocy and once in a while you get the Newsmax guy, James Rosen. But other than that, they're just softballs.
Yeah.
I can't really respond to that because I don't watch the press conferences.
Okay, well.
Yeah. It's funny because I hear these people that they talk about how, one of the excuses I hear Republicans and even on Facebook, I'm seeing this, we picked a weak field of candidates to run. And I'm saying, seriously, you think we picked candidates worse than Fetterman? We picked candidates worse than Warnock out of Katie Hobbs out of Arizona. Don't give me that. You could not pick a worse candidate than Fetterman. Okay, I mean the guy who has brain damage essentially, and I'm not saying to knock that. I mean it's the truth. The guy is not all there mentally. Because he had a stroke. He's a stroke victim. He's recovering from stroke and probably, we don't know if he will. The guy's never had a real job in his life. He lives in a house from his sister, all of these things. Yet he's supposed to be a better candidate than Dr. Oz. We picked a bad candidate that graduated from Wharton School, Business School, has been a medical doctor, a successful medical doctor, a TV host, et cetera, but we're the ones who picked a bad candidate. I mean, this kind of thinking among our own, I'm saying this is our own people. Our own people are saying they didn't vote for him because he was a weak candidate. this is the kind of thing that loses elections. So we cannot blame. Don't give me those excuses. The same in Arizona. You pick a place. Okay. Pick a place. Herschel Walker is not a worse candidate than Warnock. Okay. It's just not the case. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is if you talk to the Democrats, they will say the same thing except in reverse. They will, and I'm sure there are a lot of
a Democrat can convince you that Dr. Oz is a worse candidate or less qualified than.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
on what
well, first of all, he doesn't live in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And second of all, he's a phony. That would be the argument. I'm not saying that. That's
right.
That's the argument.
I would ask him to prove it, to show me how he's a phony. I mean, these are the questions I would ask. I mean, and I would list them 1 through 10.
But I think more than that is that, there's, for whatever reason, and again, here's something
let me just finish that thought. But even so, I mean, let's say those are all true, but it doesn't make him worse than him, is what I'm saying, or weaker than that.
And we have to keep I think we always forget these things. Mm-hmm. Somebody wins by 50% plus one and we take it as a mandate. Look, so a 60-40 election is a blowout. Mm-hmm. 60-40 is one vote in 10. If one person in 10 changes their vote, it's dead even. Yeah. Well, so all of these, so what you're talking about, ultimately what it came down to, and I don't know what the final margin in Pennsylvania was, but a few thousand people thought John Fetterman was a less bad candidate than and that's usually what it is.
But the problem though is that it's not just that, it's the direction of the nation, because it's the Senate. See, that's what makes it so important.
No, I agree that these are all important. The
nation hangs in the balance.
And I also think, so parties blaming their candidates is, they always do that. And you do want to go back and look and say, okay, who could we have had here, or what could our candidate done better? All of that has a valid point. But don't blame the candidates. Vote the people who didn't, blame the people who didn't vote.
That's my point. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Let me say this though. I think Madison Horn was probably one of the worst. She's a carpetbagger, just moved here to run. There were so many people in the legislature, the Democrats, that I thought would have been fantastic candidates.
But she's the one who signed up.
Exactly.
She's the one.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there actually was a prime.
That's the party's function, is to recruit their best field. That's what the Democrat Party should have done. And it really, to me, makes the Democrat Party.
Is she the one that went against, she went on the other side, yeah.
I mean.
Well, you know why then? That's because I don't think anybody wanted to run against,
and that's
Langford.
why, we used to have that in the GOP in the 80s. If you ever talked to, what's his name, Bob Anthony. Uh-huh. Oh, back in those days, it was tough for the GOP to field those statewide offices. And in fact, he said, I want to run for the legislature. And they right away, no, you are running for statewide office. Yeah. And he figured he was the sacrificial lamb. And what do you know? He was the first Republican to get elected.
We couldn't get anybody to run against Langford even in the primary.
Well,
in fact, what's his name changed sides and decided to run over against Mullen.
Right, yeah. But that's the party not bringing out the best.
Right,
and you've got to do that. You got to do that.
Often, what you get in these elections, and too often, is a party will wind up, or even both parties will wind up with 2, 3, 4 candidates in one race that you're fine with any of them. Mm-hmm. And nobody in some of the other races that you would want to see in office.
Yes, and there's in fact, a friend of mine said to Kevin Hearn privately, because Hearn was looking at Winnie and Huff.
Yeah, he wanted to get in there.
Well, he was asking some people close to him, and a friend of mine said, no, you need to get in this race against Langford. Langford's got damage here amongst the Republican Party. And, eventually, of course, Hearn decided to stay put. And I agree. I think it's good that he did. But, this is the problem we have, is a lot of times we aren't recruiting the best. And then we get demagogued. And we'll look at our 2nd district. What was there, 13 people that
14, I think. 14.
And what? The best one got 15% in the primary?
The one who well, I don't know who you consider the best, but the one who got the most votes got 15%. Yeah. The 2 guys in the runoff got a total of less than 30%.
Yeah. All right, Eddie.
You can tell by the music.
It has been an honor.
Oh, well, no,
yeah,
this
was good. We're just
getting
getting going. And do not forget, we need to have our other discussion.
Okay,
that
sure.
we were going to, because now I think that's a worthy discussion. Hey, everybody. Thank you for hanging with us for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Holy cow.
Holy cow.
Doesn't seem like more than 2 hours and 10 minutes.
This was really, really, really good today, seriously, and I hope you'll take notes. Invite your friends to listen.
Yes.
God bless. Have a great week.
I'm reminded again that the very same God that dreamt of the ocean set the stars into place. Well, he knows me, my name. The very same God that put the world into motion is listening today. Here's what I say when I pray. Oh, when I pray. I thank you for the faith that keeps me inspired, that tells me every day